Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Before we get started, I just want to let you guys know that this week's episode is brought to you by my new online course, Become a Superhuman. And yes, it sounds exactly like the title of the podcast, but this is actually an online course where we go into the various aspects of improving your health, specifically your endocrine health. More specifically, getting your testosterone up to the optimal levels. Now, whether you're a male or a female, as we've learned in numerous episodes of the show, testosterone is the ultimate feel-good motivation, improved health, improved fitness, improved body composition, super drug. Okay, so everything from your mood to your recovery time and everything in between is affected by your body's endocrine health. And what my team and I have done is we've actually taken years of my own self-experimentation, years of research, every possible literature and study we could find, and we've condensed it into a simple 3 to 4 hour program that you can follow along and make simple, safe, and easy adjustments to your lifestyle to improve your endocrine health. Now, as listeners of this podcast, you can get a very special discount by visiting jle.vi/T. That's jle.vi, just like my name, /T for testosterone. Well, hello, super friends, and welcome to today's show. You guys, today we welcome nutrition expert and public speaker, I'm going to try and get this one right, Jaakko Halmetoja to the show. Jaako is the host of the InspiRadio Podcast and has spent the last few years popularizing some very unique uses of unusual foods like chaga mushroom, chocolate, wild foods, berries, and medicinal herbs you probably don't eat on a regular basis. He's also the author of 2 books, including one enticingly titled The Biohackers Handbook. So my goal for this episode was to get a bit wider with nutrition, but also to go far beyond the topic of paleo that we've covered before. As you guys probably detected, I've gotten really interested in the biohacking space, and so I wanted to discover unique foods, unusual findings, surprising takeaways, not just in nutrition, but also in biohacking and different kind of unique things that you can do to eke more performance out of your body. So in the episode, we do talk about a wide variety of health and biohacking topics. We talk superfoods, we talk unusual supplements, different ways to hack your body and mind. Honestly, I really enjoyed Jaako's very holistic approach to nutrition and nutrients. It's so much less rigid and pinpointed than so many of the experts out there. And that was really my biggest takeaway from the episode, is that it's really about this big picture, the overall lifestyle, the overall combination of things you're eating and when you're eating them, how you're eating them, much more than it is about very specific compounds or nutrients or behaviors. And I think that's a lesson that we could all stand to take out of this episode. By the way, if you guys do enjoy the episode, I want to let you guys know about the episode's sponsor, which is Four Sigmatic Foods. Now you'll see Jaako actually mentions Four Sigmatic and their wonderful products throughout the course of the episode. And I also mentioned that you guys can get a 15% discount by visiting our website or just going to the quick short link, jle.vi/mushrooms, and then use the coupon code superhuman at checkout. It's the easiest way, fastest way to consume these healthful and health promoting mushroom products that Jaako is so adamant about and so excited about. Now, without any further ado, guys, let me present to you, I'm going to try to get this one right again, Mr. Jaakko Halmetoja. Jaako, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. Just found a peaceful space here in Turku where I'm right now. We have a big expo coming up this weekend and a lot of balls in the air, but nice spot to have an interview. So thanks for that.
Brilliant. I really appreciate you making the time. I understand that you've actually listened to the show before, so that's pretty exciting for us.
Yeah, definitely. I pretty much try to keep up with all the new inspirational and good content podcasts. That's just one of the cornerstones of my own, learning. And how long have you been doing this podcast?
2 years.
2 years. Yeah, I think it was pretty early on. I don't remember who you were interviewing, but I picked it up from Google Alerts or something like that.
Amazing. Yeah. So, Jaako, tell us a bit about yourself and how it is that you came to be where you are and doing what you are today.
Okay, I think that kind of a short version is that, first of all, both of my parents are PEs, and I've been raised, at the sports institutes and places like that. And I've been into athletics my whole life. In 2007, I got out from the special forces. I was a paratrooper for a year there, and had quite a bit of training in martial arts space. In 2008, I think I won Finnish championships in submission wrestling. So I've been in that world most of my life. And around that time, I met a very interesting guy who basically had a pretty hard MS. And he had to, figure out all the alternatives and stuff like that. And we were having conversation, and I found it very fascinating. Like, he was talking about all the superfoods and herbs and stuff that you don't really hear in more kind of a performance world. So we did a little test with some of my athletic friends. Some of them were like Olympic level athletes. And what was the most fascinating thing for me was not just the performance enhancement, but also how profoundly it affected my emotions and mental state and just the overall clarity. And after that, I just went pretty much crazy. Like, what are the mechanics behind this? And during the first year after that, I read over 100 books on nutrition and just, started the company. And I've been an entrepreneur since I was 20, and that's been just hacking my road in that space. But kind of inner transformation, how clear and good you can actually feel all the time, that pretty much changed the game.
Incredible. I didn't realize you were such an avid reader. We'll have to touch on that a little bit.
Not anymore that much, but at that time, that was a big part. Yeah.
Wow, incredible. And so, Jaako, I want to get a better understanding. What is it that you're doing today? I understand you're doing a lot of speaking, you're writing books, but kind of how would you describe your job or function?
Well, I'm pretty much selling information in a way of kind of edutainment. So I give a lot of speaks, keynotes, presentations, and just try to teach people ways of approaching health in more fun and manageable way. Other than that, I consult companies. So I work as a product development manager or advisor for several different companies, mostly in space of biohacking or superfoods or those types of things. And those are the main things that I'm focusing right now. And of course, writing comes along and podcasting and all the info business. But yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So really a jack of all trades in the biohacking, nutrition, and kind of wellness space.
Yeah.
So let's get the obvious question out of the way so we can dive into kind of some of the stuff that you're more known for and is kind of more unique and original. Tell us about your diet and nutrition regimen.
Yeah, I think before that, actually, I was following paleo approach. We were having quite a few MMA guys, like a decade ago, pretty deep into that. And I think, I stumbled across Mark Sisson's work and all those key paleo books, Western Price, all that. And that worked really well when I was doing athletics more. But after that, as I said, I dig deeper into kind of a health and wellness space. And ever since, it's been more or less, plants and fungi and just different kingdoms. And, I do pretty high herbal approach these days. So I don't really think about like macronutrients or any of that. But I try to play around more with kind of novel chemistry that is present in wild plants and herbs and stuff like that. So I would say that today I do kind of high superfood, super herb kind of a approach. And of course, I eat from all the kingdoms, whether it was, animals or bacteria, fungi, insects, all of that. So pretty much still on the road to kind of widen up the portfolio, what we can eat, what we can play around. And how they fit into a overall protocol. But it's very hard to describe because it changes so much.
I like that. And I do hear some similarities between you and your countryman and I guess colleague, Tero Isokalpila, who we had on the show, who talked also about this huge kingdom of foods that we just completely neglect. You mentioned that you actually know Tero and that he's been to one of your lectures.
Yeah, I think it was the first kind of official lecture around nutrition that I gave, and Tero was in the audience, and I was for several years an advisor for Four Sigmatic, which is a big mushroom / superfood company. So I'm a good friend with Tero, and I really love how they're popularizing the kingdom of mushrooms.
Absolutely. Yeah. Totally awesome guy. Totally awesome company for anyone who hasn't had a chance to check them out.
Yeah.
So when I research you, you're known largely for your work around promoting unique foods, specifically like chaga and medicinal herbs. So we did talk a little bit with Tero on mushrooms, but we didn't get a chance to really go in to any one specific one in any depth. So tell me, why write an entire book about the chaga mushroom? What's so special? What does it do? And who should take it? Where can we find it? Give me kind of the crash course in chaga, if you will.
Yay. That's one of my deep loves. But I think that it came up because I give over 100 presentations a year, and I got quite a bit of feedback from people who are just playing around with the stuff. And over the years, I got so much feedback from people really, doing larger amounts of these medicinal mushrooms for autoimmune diseases, cancer cases, you name it, that I was kind of, saturated about pretty unique feedback, how well these things play out. And after that, I just, went into the research mode and, did everything around chaga. I translated books from Russian that has never been done and just dig everything up. And it's one of those things that in Finland, we have it all over the place, but nobody uses it. So I just think that it's so fun to kind of rediscover things that are already around us, but nobody sees the value in them. And we have a pretty long folklore around chaga, and we had a whole chaga mafia thing here in Finland to promote the idea. And essentially, it's boiling down that these medicinal mushrooms pretty much they modulate your microbiome. They work on your gut or gut-brain axis and all those things, but they're really good for immune system. And I just think that whether you were an athletic people or anybody else in this world, we have quite a big problem in our immune system, whether it was that it's overrunning or it's running too low. And these types of herbs that kind of work as immunomodulators or regulators are very helpful in kind of an overall approach. I like to say that it's kind of a feeding protein to your immune system. So just one of the top things that I've found in terms of immune helping herbs / approaches.
Interesting. Okay, that's very cool. So what I think is so interesting is that, in the plant kingdom, we all know you have plants that are so widely different, right? You have aloe vera on one side that calms the skin, and you have marijuana on another side, or tobacco or coffee. And I think what people don't realize, and what maybe the message here is, that the fungi kingdom has the exact same thing. You have chaga all the way on this end, which is an immune boosting mushroom. And on another side, you have something like lion's mane, which is a neurocognitive stimulant kind of thing.
Yeah, you know your stuff.
I've been doing this a while.
Yeah, but I think it boils down also to the idea that annual plants produce chemistry, but they are not as, how would I put it? They're not as professional as plants that grow for decades, or trees or mushrooms that in case of chaga, it can be, 30 years old.
Wow.
So it produces very different and more novel chemistry that we can benefit of. And I see this across the whole cornucopia of herbal approaches. Especially every time I go to the Amazon, most of the plant medicines that the shamans use come from the tree barks.
Interesting.
And it's just very simple that if you have a plant that's hundreds of years old, it produces very different chemistry on the surface of a tree, whether it was cinnamon, whether it was, euphorbium, you name it. So in a case of plants, it's usually, ginseng roots that might be, a century old, 150-year-old, or, rhodiola growing 30 years. But this is just an interesting angle that when we really dig deeper into herbalisms, we start to pattern recognize what's happening. And these things produce very different chemistry.
Right. That's interesting. And I think that's why Tero was saying that up to 40% or maybe more, a huge percentage of pharmaceuticals are actually based on fungi, not on plants.
Yes. That's also simple. If you think about it, it's much older kingdom of life. And they have grown together with microbes and viruses and stuff like that. And they produce much more specific chemistry against those things. So whether it was antibiotics, whether it was, in case of chaga, it's one of the antiviral top guns of the world. I think it's pretty clear to see that these are good allies for us in terms of immune defense system. So
what's the protocol? I mean, is this something people should take, some chaga capsules every day? Is it something you should eat once in a while? And if so, how should people get it?
Yeah, I think that I pretty much recommend for most of people stuff like for example, what Four Sigmatic has. So they'll dual extracted, like really, really strong extract that you can just mix into water or just take by themselves. But in Finland, I try to teach people to actually start on, making decoctions, come out from the kind of weak herbalism where we use tea bags and, Lipton type of approach to get very small amount of very low quality herbs, but have a big kettle, put the herbs in and actually boil them out for a couple of hours in many cases. Oh, wow. And if you get that stuff going on, then you start to use that as a base for your bone broth or your kombucha or your chocolate elixir or your coffee. So I see that there's just so many ways you can implement this base liquid into your daily life. But for most people who are not doing those kinds of, how would I put it, overall approaches, the extract powders and stuff like that is the way to go.
I love it. And I think you and I are going to be fast friends because you just basically read the contents of my refrigerator, the bone broth, kombucha, coffee. I love it. And for anyone out there, by the way, who hasn't checked out Four Sigmatic, we actually have a link on our website where people can get 15% off and try their products. Not that this episode's sponsored by them or anything, but we do support their products. Jaako, tell me, what other foods besides fungi have you found that are extremely powerful in terms of promoting health?
Well, I think that as we've discussed, there's been kind of a racism in a case of kingdoms. So we are highly focused on plants and animals. And now, especially when, cowspiracy and all this stuff comes up, people in a mainstream focus more on like, how much should we eat from the plant kingdom? How much from the animal kingdom? But there is still so much in just around bacteria. So I'm huge on fermented foods and especially wild strains of bacteria. So you have a blackcurrant leaf. So it's filled with probiotics on top of the leaf. So that's why it's used as a starter in many cases for fermented, sauerkrauts or wild plants or whatever. So I just think that that's one of the things that we should do more frequently. I don't recommend people to, do 100 grams of sauerkraut every day, but a small amount of living fermented foods frequently. So I think that's one of those things that we kind of lost, that especially here in Finland, that was the only way to, keep greens around during the winter. So that's just an overall approach. If I think about the main hackable system, which is your, gut in general. So more friendly bacteria in there. And if you combine it with, let's say, a lot of berries and good strains of prebiotics, then you get life going and you get healthy ecosystem and your brain starts to work more clearly. And of course, your immune system, nervous system, all these things. So just to keep it at the level of kind of kingdoms, I'm big on bacteria also.
I really like that. And, I spend so much time bad bad-mouthing the most common fermented food, which is alcohol. But in fact, I still do drink kombucha. I try to eat sauerkraut, kimchi, stuff like that. I think you're absolutely right. That is important to keep those in the diet, if for no other reason than the microbiome.
Yeah. And it's been interesting for me because I've been farming for years to see how it affects plants. So if you start to get deeper into soil science and actually all the symbiotic organisms living on the soil, I give probiotics to my plants. I give mycorrhizal fungi. I dump kilos of spirulina, minerals, all that stuff. And you can reflect how healthy those plants are. So it's a good metaphor what's happening inside of us if we really get that soil going in our gut.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about medicinal herbs. You talked about blackcurrant as being a health promoting one. Talk to me about chocolate, because I know you've also done some really interesting work there.
Yeah, I think it was back in the day I went into Hawaii to spend a little bit of time with one of my friends who's a chocolate farmer. And it's just one of those kind of a gateway drug type of things that when you get people excited about chocolate, you can show the contrast between all the stuff that we have available. Most of the stuff that people are eating is just, crappy chocolate that comes from Ivory Coast with all the ethical problems and hybrid species and, very low mineral soil and possible cadmium contaminations and stuff like that. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have so great varieties and so good ways to use chocolate or cacao as a kind of a vehicle to blend in all the other herbs. And this is, basic Amazonian shamanism, that you take, let's say, cacao or mucuna and blend them with cayenne peppers and stuff that even more enhances the absorption of different things. Peppers, piperine, most of the people have heard that it increases bioavailability of turmeric or active ingredients in there, but it does it to all the other things also. So I think that chocolate in general is a good way to get people's attention and then teach people all the variables around that space. But I'm a huge fan. So cool and so funny thing to do with people and bring back the energy and joy and sharing and all that. That's pretty much health.
That's really interesting. Okay, so we have a little bit of a list here: chaga, chocolate, blackcurrant, fermented foods. Are there any other things before we kind of move on that you would want to throw in that have massive health benefits? And if so, why?
Well, I think I approach it in a way that what, let's say, Ayurvedic medicine or traditional Chinese medicine has to offer, what we can pick from, folklores of Russia or different ecosystems. So this is actually a pretty new thing, that we are living in so abundant world that we have all of these tools available. And of course, my long-term thinking is how we can grow these things in the best possible way. So I'm not growing just potatoes or stuff like that, but ashwagandha and tulsi and, rhodiola, stuff like that. So I think that the top herbs in every system like these that have been around for literally thousands of years, whether it was reishi mushroom or ginseng from traditional Chinese medicine, hoshu or shilajit or ashwagandha, tulsi, there's so many kind of great tools to play around that, for example, for me, rhodiola has been one of those things that I've used for past 5 years pretty much intensively all the time, because I see that it modulates the stress reactions so well. And there's quite a bit of science about rhodiola. So that would be one of the top picks from our Arctic environment that I would recommend for most of the people in the kind of information working space.
Awesome. All right, cool. So I'm pretty satisfied with that list. I definitely learned about a few new ones. Talk to me about the term superfood. How do you feel about that word?
Well, it's a marketing term, but it's been around, 100 years. I think that I found the first references around it in, 1915 in an Oxford dictionary or something like that. So it's just a term to describe that some foods have more nutritional value per gram than others. But today it's used so loosely that we get back to the same thinking that most of the people are just eating terms and they don't dig deeper, like what's the difference between, cacao that's grown in Ecuador with hybrid species of CCN51 and, older varieties that have been grown there for 50 years, and what's the aroma and nutrient density in those species, even though those can be sold as organic raw chocolate or whatever. So that doesn't kind of solve the problem if we are still, topic readers. But it's a good way to kind of popularize some of the tools that we have around. But at the same time, it's a problematic because then people think that you put lucuma powder into your smoothie and you start to, shoot spider web from your wrist or something. So that won't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So how about the term organic? I mean, you mentioned that term when it comes to chocolate. Do you think that that's also a good bit of marketing hype, or do you feel like it does make a lot of sense to eat mostly organic produce?
Well, I think it's a good kind of direction. But I'm much more into genetics of plants. So if we still use these pretty weak domesticated varieties of plants and grow them organically, we don't necessarily get more nutrient density without growing them, with pesticides and all that. But if we start to focus more on heirloom varieties, stronger plants, then we're actually going to get much more wide array of chemistry and nutrient density. But of course, organic in general is a good approach in terms of some of the ecological problems and just value chains, who we support with our money and all that. But in terms of just nutrient density, that's not the kind of end point of the spectrum.
Interesting. Okay, so how can people prioritize finding more nutrient dense foods? I mean, I guess my ultimate question here is, how can people start to make practical improvements in their day-to-day consumption of micronutrients?
Yeah, I think for many people, like paleo type of approach is very good because you get very high nutrient dense things from organ meats and bone broths and stuff like that. And that's when people start to actually mineralize the body. Other than that, if you try to get those from plant kingdom, then you pretty much got to get out from the supermarket space, because most of the time there's not that much nutrition left. Even though if you start to, let's say, choose kale and, dark green leafy vegetable, you're getting nutrition out of that. But for me, the kind of superfood space is a good insurance policy in that way. And of course, you get a lot more phytonutrients that from animal kingdom. So wild foods, superfoods, just more vibrant species of plants that have been around, for a long time, and they are not as domesticated as, conventional foods. I think that's a kind of a naive look at the plants in general.
Definitely. I like the term nutritional insurance policy. I think it's come up a lot with different green juices that people consume for the same reason. It's just like, in most cases, cannot get too many micronutrients. I mean, there are such things as vitamin overdoses and mineral overdoses, but in the course of normal food consumption, you kind of can't go wrong, and you should really err on the side of getting more nutrients than you need.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that people kind of get messed up a little bit when we look at the science that you take just the one ingredient or one compound out of plants, let's say it's a beta carotene or something like that. And all of these things work in a kind of chain reactions. So it's very different that what's happening in the body than what's happening in the test tube. So yeah, beta carotene is a pro-oxidant. No, it's not, because if you eat a carrot or something like that, there's a lot of other compounds that work before and after that reaction. So it's much harder to get a kind of a nutrient overdose from a whole foods, but of course that's also possible.
Absolutely. Jaako, tell me about the Biohackers Handbook. I think I really want to read this book, but tell me in advance, what am I going to learn in there?
That's a just superb book. We're supposed to get the print version out today, but the printing press somehow messed up the system, so we need to wait for a couple of more days. But that's been a huge project that we've been now working almost 4 years with medical doctor Olli Sovijärvi and tech expert Teemu Arina. And we wanted to combine all the science, all the kind of anecdotal hacks and tricks that we know and put them together. So now it's a bit over 500-page book. It's a handbook.
Wow.
There's over 1,500 references to mostly meta-analysis. So that's a huge amount of science that we went through. There is over 300 illustrated photos of the systems that we want to hack, and just to make it more fun to read. So I would say it's the most well-packaged book around this space of nutrition, biohacking, self-improvement ever done.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I was afraid you were going to say, oh, that's like a short ebook that we wrote. Just telling. No, I like bookshelf breakers. I'm really excited about it.
No, definitely not. And the English version is coming up, I think, early 2017. Brilliant. You can find the sleep chapter for free from the biohackershandbook.com. And we have a summit here in Finland. We already had in London. And we are just trying to keep the space up and put together all the people who are really into this stuff. And that's a good handbook for everybody interested in that.
Absolutely. There seems to be really a strong community. It's like Finland is becoming the biohacking community, what Holland has become to the EDM dance music community. It's you and it's Tero and it's the guys over at Human Charger. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that people in here, we are just quite a bit of in contact with each other because there's not too many people in Finland. So whenever there is a, expo or event, you pretty much connect with all the guys and gals who are making it happen in the space. So I think that communication, once again, is a big factor for making stuff happen.
Rock on. So tell me about this. Out of these 1,500 references, I'm assuming you've experimented on your own body. What are the top 2 or 3 biohacks, non-dietary, that you've done, and what were the results?
Oh, man. This is hard, but I think especially now in November, we had Rhonda Patrick coming on our summit.
Oh, cool.
And of course, I assume that many people are really into Wim Hof stuff.
Yeah,
so in Finland, we have abundance of saunas and, cold and heat therapies in here. And that's been one of the things that, I played around that for a long time, but now really getting into it. And the improvements, especially in sleep quality, are profound. Mm-hmm. So I think that hot and cold therapies in general, whether it was cryo, whether it was ice swimming, cold showers, doing the breathing if you can, that's just one of those things that had opened up the whole space for self-exploration in many ways. So I'm huge on that right now. And tomorrow we'll start the morning by going to ocean and really get ourselves going. We have a big expo day and do that every day and follow with the sauna in the night. So brilliant. That's definitely one of the big ones.
Brilliant. I definitely need to get back into Wim's class. I petered off because I went on vacation somewhere where I couldn't get cold water. Literally the water came out of the pipes hot and I never got back into it. And it's one of my goals to finish by the end of the year. So I just need to get back in and finish.
Highly recommend that. Other than that, I think that what was fascinating, I've been doing meditation practices for years now, but just to use simple, Muse or tools like that to measure your brain waves and get the biofeedback going, that was really helpful at one phase of doing more and more meditation and getting the feedback in a way of, some kind of sound picture, I would say. And to train yourself to be more in the kind of a calm space with technological tools in that space. I think that Muse was one of the early gadgets in that space. And I found that very helpful for like a half a year. That was a cool tool.
Awesome. I haven't experienced Muse. I bought the Melon headband and it was terrible, just flat out terrible. But I need to play with the Muse one.
Yeah, there are so many of those like beta version stuff. Yesterday I used one of these. It's called Mayo. So it reads your electromyography from your arm pretty much. So you can give presentations and just click your fingers and it will change the slide. But those are so not solid. So they bug a lot. But there's a lot of cool stuff coming up and a lot of those that are not just ready there.
Right. Absolutely. Jaakko, is there anyone else in the biohacking space that you really look up to? I know you mentioned Wim Hof.
Well, I think that I try to keep my awareness just around the whole community, what's happening. I'm sure that you're big on, let's say, I just listened keynote from Jim Quick. So whether it was learning, whether it was, I'm big on Daniel Vitalis, who's more in the kind of a nature-based approach. So I try to blend it up a lot, just to listen from all of these subgroups that are under this big umbrella of self-improvement and biohacking, in a sense that technology is just disrupting the whole industry. So it's just going to happen. But I have quite a bit of love still into nature and all those things. So I'm pretty biased towards Wim Hof or Daniel Vitalis. And if I, listen too much of Dave Asprey and those guys who are really techies, I kind of get an allergic reaction a bit. But I listen a lot of the key people in the space. But if I try to think about some specific guys, no, not really. I can't recall any kind of cool ones that most of the people, I think, that wouldn't have heard.
Rock on. So we covered meditation. We covered a lot, really. But tell me, are there any other skills or habits or routines that you feel make you perform at a higher level?
Well, I think that for years I've been doing this kind of a goal-setting approach in more systems thinking way. So I've been writing the playbook of life for myself for the past 5 years. And it's a 100-page book. Just for myself. Cool. I print it out as a hardcover, but it goes through all the main areas of life. What are my intentions? What are my goals? How do I approach them? And I go through that every morning. And what I do, I just want to make it more clear why I'm doing this. And when you get more aware of the kind of mental models, how do you approach things? You get a glimpse of how your brain works in very different occasions, very different genres of things. And I think that's been super helpful in terms of self-awareness and clearing what you kind of just want from your mind or your ego and what are actually in line with the bigger mission than yourself. And that's been a cornerstone of what I do in terms of meditation or clearing up what I want to do.
I like that. The aspect of self-reflection and having this knowledge of self is something that always comes up for me time and time again as one of the biggest hacks you can have.
Yes.
Amazing. So Jaakko, tell us, what's the best $100 you've ever spent on your health? I know that's a tough question.
I think that cleared up when I came to this conference room because I was, going through all the podcasts that I want to listen later today. And I think it is first iPod that I bought. That's probably it, because audio learning has pretty much changed the way I learn. As I said, I was a big reader and still am in a sense of, more of the science and all that. But I don't read that many books because I'm also trying to model speaking a lot. So it's good to combine listening somebody who speaks passionately, speaks using language in a fun way, try to model that and get the kind of edutainment at the same time. So for the past decade, I've been listening hours of podcasts or audiobooks every day, and it has transformed my life completely.
Brilliant. That's a really good answer. That's a really, really good answer. I didn't expect that one.
Yeah.
So, all right, I know we're coming towards the end here. I want to ask you to complete a kind of difficult sentence, which is, most people would be much better off if they just blank.
Spend more time listening. I think it's an overall approach that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And most of the people just listen to still think what they're going to say next. But to actually listen nature, listen other people, listen what's happening around us, and spend more time in a space where you are not actively doing something, but actually receiving information. And that's what I've modeled. Many of the top performers, they do. They listen more and they pay attention on what they're actually listening.
Absolutely. I think that's a really, really good one. And I've been working on my kind of lessons of adulthood, this almost like your book to yourself. I've been writing kind of a set of things that I've learned as an adult. And that's definitely one of them, is that listening is such an under-prioritized skill.
Yes. It boils down also that whether it was Simon Sinek's Start With Why or whatever, people buy your intentions. And if you are more clear with your intent, then you can communicate it more like a outcome-oriented communication way. And it's just a catalyst for getting stuff done more quickly. Because if you are clear what you're actually after, you can package it by words much more effectively. And that's a good tool for that.
Absolutely. So Jaako, I want to thank you so much for spending your evening with us. I know you have a very busy weekend coming up. If people want to learn more and get in touch with you, second to last question here, where can they go ahead and do that? Where should we send them?
Yeah, so Jaakko Halmetoja.info, if you can pronounce that. So that's the place where you can find all of my socials and all the other stuff. And biohackershandbook.com is the landing page for everything happening in English in that sense. And, you can shout out on Twitter or Instagram. You can find it through my name. So those are those.
Brilliant. And we will link everyone up in the show notes for this episode at becomingasuperhuman.com. Jaako, I want to ask you last question here, which is, if people take away just one message from this episode and they carry it with them for the rest of their lives, what would you hope for that message to be?
I think I approach it in a way that what's doable, not what you should do, but what you know you can actually do. And that boils down to those tools around hot and cold. You can start every day by doing a cold shower. And if you actually train yourself to do that every day, that will be a tremendously beneficial tool for the rest of your life. So open yourself up to the cold as an element, explore it, and do that for the rest of your life.
Brilliant. Jaako, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Again, I really appreciate it. I definitely learned quite a bit, and I cannot wait to check out your book. So thanks again.
Thanks a lot. We kept it short. This was brilliant.
Short and sweet. All right, my friend. Well, take care.
Take care.
All right, super friends, that's it for this week's episode. We hope you really, really enjoyed it and learned a ton of applicable stuff that can help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If so, please do us a favor and leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or however you found this podcast. In addition to that, we are always looking for great guest posts on the blog or awesome guests right here on the podcast. So if you know somebody, or you are somebody, or you have thought of somebody who would be a great fit for the show or for our blog, please reach out to us either on Twitter or by email. Our email is info@becomingasuperhuman.com. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.